Hey everyone, it is late at night and I am Norman. This is the 29th day of my 30 dress watches in 30 days challenge. So we're right up at the end of it. And I was kind of pondering my day 30 choice because I wanted to do something a bit different for the finale of this challenge. Which means that my list has an extra watch on it. So I was looking at the last couple watches I had on my list and had to choose which one I was going to do away with. And what watch did I get rid of? So the piece that I thought I would remove from this list is a brilliant looking watch, but we've already looked at some amazing white dial Roman numeral watches in previous videos in this challenge. So I felt it might be a little bit redundant. I like the brand, haven't experienced them in person, but everything that I've seen and heard from those out there who have owned them are all positive. So the watch that was on my list is the rotary Sherlock Holmes watch. This is a great looking piece with Breguet hands, Roman numerals, a textured white dial. Just super classy, super dressy, but yeah, we've already seen similar. So what watch did I choose to keep in this list? The Oris Rectangular. And this is a watch that I've mentioned in one of my previous tank style dress watches video, but it definitely belongs on this list. This is an amazing looking tank style watch. I found a write-up of it on Worn and Wound, and they were looking at a dark blue dial variant. These are available in a few different colors. So you have sort of an olive green, a white dial, a blue dial, and a red dial. And the link to this article and one other article that I found discussing the Oris Rectangular are both linked in the description below. And if you're a fan of vintage watches, dress watches, or off the beaten path watches, you might want to subscribe to this channel. And of course, if you're enjoying this video, do the thing. Hit the like button. All the things that you do on YouTube, and that I'm supposed to remind you to do. So the author of this Worn and Wound article actually began his watch journey collecting vintage watches. However, as prices have gotten crazy, and there are more and more pieces that have been refurbished, he's kind of shifted over to contemporary pieces. However, after reviewing this watch, his conclusion of it is it reminds him of pieces that he would have been hunting down back when he was into vintage watches. And that is the beauty of tank-style dress watches. They are so classy, and they're a perfect fit for people who love vintage aesthetic, and in some cases, proportions as well. So this dark blue variant that's discussed in this article has Arabic numerals for the 12, 3, and 9. It has a date window at the 6 o'clock. They're kind of reverso-ish, at least in the dial. The case is stepped on the sides, which reminds me, in honor of this watch, tonight I'm wearing my Longines Dolce Vita. And this watch also has a stepped case on the side. In fact, from certain angles, this and the Oris look very similar, mainly just the sides of the case. The Dolce Vita is a little bit more rounded in its case design, whereas the Oris has sharper angles. It looks more Art Deco, that's for sure. The tone of that blue dial is absolutely amazing. I love it. It looks so great in these photos. It looks so great in the wrist shots, of course. The hands on these watches are actually kind of similar to what's on the Dolce Vita. They're sort of sword hands, but they get wider right before they start moving into a point. There's a center seconds hand on the Oris Rectangular. These are very affordable watches in comparison to pieces like JLC's Reverso or Cartier tanks, but they're kind of expensive when compared to items like the Longines Dolce Vita. So these watches retail for about $2,000. The movement inside them is the Oris 561. They have 30 meters of water resistance. And like the Dolce Vita, they have an odd lug width, 17 millimeters, which is exactly what the Dolce Vita has. So maybe I need to get an Oris Rectangular and I can swap straps. But I also found a write-up of these watches on Gear Patrol. I've actually found a few decent articles by this site. It used to be that it was kind of like non-watch nerd type watches on most of the lists that I encountered. They also got some great shots of these watches, such amazing looking wrist shots. And the author of this article makes an excellent point to open it up. The perfectly proportioned rectangular watch is like a different species from your typical round watch. It simply can't be judged in the same way. We're talking about a rare style from modern watch brands, and it's even rarer to find an example that manages to strike the right balance and proportions to pull it off well. And I absolutely agree. It is difficult to gauge how a rectangular watch is going to fit until you see it in person, or if that's what you collect. Then you're kind of used to what the different proportions mean. When you're collecting round watches, you know what a 40 millimeter watch is roughly. Some might wear larger than others, but you know how big a 40 millimeter watch is. I find that with rectangular pieces, you can look at numbers and think that's a great size, but when you see it in person, it's not what you thought at all. That happened to me with the first Dolce Vita that I owned. When I received that watch, it was so much bigger than I thought it was going to be, because rectangular watches are completely different creatures. You cannot shop for them using familiar sizes. If you're thinking a 36 millimeter wide rectangular watch will be perfect, that's going to be a large rectangular watch. 36 millimeters is totally different for rectangular versus round. So excellent point to open up this article with. The author also put together some pros and cons, so let's look at those. Pros: perfectly proportioned for this type of watch. Loomed hands. Interesting details like stepped case and Art Deco dial. And for the cons, will be small for some tastes. The date display is almost too small to read. Strap colors are sometimes hard to match to clothing. Yeah, and if you look at the different colorways, yeah, those straps would be difficult. But you can always swap them. It's just too bad it's 17 millimeters for the lugs. So your options are a bit more limited than if it were 18. Yeah. So what are the proportions on this watch? The case is 25.5 millimeters wide and 38 millimeters tall. Lug to lug. It's 10.3 millimeters thick. So to put that in perspective, this Dolce Vita is 2 millimeters smaller than the Oris Rectangular. So this is 23 by 36. And for me personally, this is the perfect size for a rectangular watch. So adding a couple millimeters to it, I think would make it more accessible to more people, because I feel like this Dolce Vita is probably too small for a lot of guys out there, unless they've gone little. And what's really cool about this Gear Patrol article is they actually mention some other rectangular watches in here, including the Dolce Vita. They mention a Baume Mercier Hampton at $1,600, the Longines at $1,600, although mine was not that much, so I'm not sure exactly what variant they were looking at. There's a bunch of options in the Dolce Vita line. If you haven't already looked at it and you like tank style dress watches, you might want to, because you're not just stuck with the little tiny one that I have. There are other sizes and variants available in that line. I am not a Longines spokesperson, but I could be if you wanted me to, Longines. But I would have to differ with this author a little bit, because the Oris is brilliant, but in my opinion, the Dolce Vita is my favorite. I mean, it won me over the Cartier Tank Americaine. So, yeah. But that's probably just me, for sure. But there you have it, the brilliant Oris Rectangular. Stay tuned for the final video in this challenge, and I've got a bunch of video ideas lined up for next month. Thanks for watching.